Hey guys, this is John Gibb with Fight Insight, and I'm here doing a video for the Dan Hooker Paul Felder fight. Before I get into my predictions, I should tell you guys right out the bat, I'm a huge Dan Hooker fan. I love that guy. I'm super into his style. I love that he calls people out after fights. I think that that's such a cool quality. As Chael Sonnen once said, a lot of guys think that the most important time in the fight is that 15 minutes that you're in the ring, but really it's that few minutes where they stick a microphone in front of your face, because in that few minutes, you can ask for a promotion. You can get a bigger fight. You can further your career. I understand that people want to be respectful and, and not insult their opponents and not go out and make an ass of themselves. But, I mean, you're in the fight game. You can pick a fight. You can start a fight with somebody ahead of you. And I like that. I don't know, somebody who grew up on WWF, I like when guys call each other out. And Dan Hooker has called somebody out every single time he's won. And I really like that about him. He's fighting Paul Felder. Full disclosure, I knew Paul Felder as an announcement guy. I knew that he did commentary, but I had never gone out of my way to watch a Paul Felder fight. I had never seen that guy fight before. But researching for this video, I guess I'll start with Paul. Researching for this video, I watched 4 Paul Felder fights. I watched his last 4. I saw him fight Charles Oliveira, Mike Perry, James Vick, and Edson Barboza. That last one, Edson Barboza, if you have not seen that fight, if you're a fight fan, go watch Paul Felder versus Edson Barboza. I was blown away. Super, super good fight. And it made me a Paul Felder fan. I really like Paul Felder now. Watching him do commentary, I always thought that I knew he was a kickboxer, but I got this vibe from him that he was going to be like a point fighter, real technical, winning rounds, kind of like a Wonder Boy style. And I was super wrong. That's not him at all. He is a explosive Muay Thai guy who does a lot of spinning techniques. He's really creative, really, really tough. I'm just blown away by how tough Paul Felder is. That guy has got so much heart, it's stupid. And it makes me really excited for this Dan Hooker fight, because Dan Hooker has got heart for days too. I mean, I expect a war out of these guys. Full disclosure, my thoughts on Dan Hooker is I love that guy, man. I love city kickboxing. I love Dan Hooker's style. He's got that loose hands at the waist kind of style. I'm really into that. He works off of his jab a lot, and you don't see that in MMA a lot. So I like people their striking game is built off that jab. That's like the foundation of their house. Dan Hooker is one of the only guys, him and Jan Blachowicz is one of the only guys that I've ever seen that really uses that jab like that. Dan calls people out. I love that. Dan uses his jab a lot. He's got that loose style. He's got heart for days. He is a finisher to the extreme. You don't see many lightweights who finish fights like Dan Hooker's. I think he's got 10 wins by knockout and 7 wins by submission. He's got 2 decisions in his career, so he's got really great finishing instincts. And to a really special level, you just don't see lightweights with finishing instincts like that. So if I compare the two, Felder versus Hooker, striking wise, Felder is going to have a speed, and I think is going to have a power advantage. It's kind of hard to tell. I think that Dan's shots are heavy, but they're slower. He definitely has hurt people with the shots, so maybe I shouldn't say he's going to have a power advantage. I can't tell. He's definitely going to have a speed advantage. He's a really explosive fighter. He's more dynamic than Dan. He can throw kicks with both legs. He can throw spinning techniques. Everything looks really clean. Doesn't have much of a jab. He throws a lot more hooks than Dan does. He's got better footwork than Dan. So striking, he's going to have better footwork, a more dynamic arsenal, throws more kicks. Just, all around, he's going to have a more varied game than Dan does. And he's an explosive striker. If we look at Dan, the 2 losses he's had in the UFC, They were both two explosive strikers to Jason Knight and Edson Barboza. So that worries me for Dan. Paul is exactly what Dan has had problems with in the past. Dan's striking, if we're going to break down Dan's striking game, most of it is based off that jab. He's got a fantastic jab. He'll start combinations with his jab, end combinations with his jab. He's got a great calf kick. He had Ally Quinta barely able to stand by the end of that third round. And Ally Quinta is tough as nails. So if you got Ally Quinta barely able to stand with your calf kick, you know you can do a lot of damage with that. You can put in work with that calf kick. He's got a great step-in knee. He's finished 2 fights with his step-in knee. He times it really well. He's like a great sniper. He fights at range and he sees his opportunities and he shoots to kill. We see that with Dan more so than we see with Paul. Dan shoots to kill. He really has eyes for the finish. So he's got a great check hook. So he fights long, and if you try to push Dan, he's got a great answer for that in the check hook. I've also seen him throw some really good elbows when you come in to close that distance on him. As far as grappling is concerned, Paul, how would I describe his grappling? Paul is interesting, as in I don't think his offensive jiu-jitsu is really high level. He's not somebody who's going to take you down, pass your guard, take mount, be a submission threat. But that being said, Paul did finish Charles Oliveira on the ground. And if you don't know who Charles Oliveira is, he is an ace on the ground. He's got excellent jiu-jitsu. And Paul grappled with Charles on the ground, finished him with elbows, and was fearless about grappling with Paul on the ground. He could have got up, but he just stayed down there. And that tells me that Paul got excellent jiu-jitsu defense. He's not going to be an easy guy to submit. He knows how to utilize control positions, so he can put you in a spot where he can just control you and do ground and pound damage. So that's what I would say about Paul's grappling game. His offensive grappling is not great, but his defensive grappling is fantastic. You're not going to be able to put Paul in a lot of bad positions. You're not going to easily submit Paul. He's got great takedown defense. He's not going to be easy to take down whatsoever. As far as Dan's grappling is concerned, Dan has a horrible takedown, but Dan's got great chokes. He takes people's backs really well. He's long and lanky. He can threaten submissions fantastically. And yeah, he's an excellent grappler. The problem is Dan can't take you down. Dan is great once he gets there. Physically, so as far as physicality is concerned with these guys, Paul is going to have a strength and speed advantage for sure. He's really explosive. He's a sprinter, but Dan is a marathon runner. Dan is built for 5 rounds. He's got a more methodical pace, and he's not going to gas out over the course of the 5 rounds. So Paul's stronger and faster, but Dan is going to have a cardio edge, I think. And then as far as the intangibles are concerned, that's a tough one. Paul Felder, if you want to know how tough Paul Felder is, watch his fight with Mike Perry and realize that Paul broke his arm early in that fight, and you'd never be able to tell. He was throwing spinning back fists with it. He was throwing overhand rights with it. He just stayed in there even though his arm was broken. Great poker face. And there's more. I'm not going to waste a bunch of time with it, but Paul Felder is as tough as they come. That dude is tough as nails. Dan Hooker, if you've seen the 2 fights that he lost against Jason Knight and Edson Barboza, he took shots that would have finished lesser men and would have made them quit early on. But Dan took a beating, and he just stayed in there. So Dan's got a freaking heart of a champion too. So as far as heart is concerned, these guys may be equal. I mean, they are both tough as nails. So I'm super excited about seeing that matchup with each other. So that leaves me to who's going to win. And I don't know. I have no idea. That's a tough one. My heart tells me Dan Hooker is going to win because I love Dan Hooker. I think that Dan has better finishing instincts. I think that Dan is going to do fantastic over the course of 5 rounds. But I also, if I'm realistic with myself, Dan has had problems with explosive strikers in the past, and that's exactly what he faces in Paul Felder. So, I mean, it's a tough one. If I were putting money on this, or if you were to put a gun to my head and tell me who's going to win this fight, I say Dan Hooker. I still say Dan Hooker. Maybe because I'm emotionally attached to it, but I think that he is just a better finisher. I think it's his time. Yeah, and I think he's got better eyes. I think he finds a way to win this fight. That being said, if you are betting money on this fight, don't get mad at me because Paul Felder is an explosive striker, and Dan's had problems with that in the past. So it would not be weird to me if Paul was just too quick for Dan and got off first and caught him a lot. But that being said, that's my prediction. I think Dan Hooker wins this fight. And I can't wait to see it. This fight's going to be awesome. I mean, if you aren't a fan of either of these guys, I swear to God, watch this fight. I would not be surprised if it's a fight of the year candidate. Dan Hooker, Paul Felder, this Saturday. Watch it. All right, you guys, I will see you next time.